So then I'm going to set up this website and maybe some other ones like it. And I'm going to do a series of videos for young university students and for high school students, and I'm going to tell them that perhaps they don't need to go to university to be indoctrinated. Perhaps they could go to university to learn, and if they want to know the difference between an educator and someone who's merely interested in indoctrination and the production of the next generation of pathetic, whining radicals, then they can use the website to distinguish between people who are credible and people who aren't, and maybe we can drop the damn enrollment in those horrible courses by 75% over the next 3 years and just stop it in its tracks. So anyways, that's part of the plan, and I think it's something that's actually implementable. These things can turn around fast, and one of the ways that they'll turn around is that if people just stop taking the courses. And so what people need to do in order to know that they should stop taking the courses is to know what it is that these courses are aiming at. So that needs to be explained. Then they need to know what language the people who teach these courses are using in order to fulfill those aims. Then they need to know how to identify the courses. Then they need to know that it's in their best interest, both, I would say, spiritually and economically, to avoid those courses and those disciplines like the plague. And then maybe we can get the disciplines that have become entirely corrupt and the ones that started that way to put themselves back together before they run themselves out of existence completely. And I might as well name a few of the disciplines that I think are particularly reprehensible to begin with. Obviously, I'm painting this with a very broad brush, and I'm not making the claim that every single person who engages in activity within all of these disciplines has been corrupted beyond comprehension by the postmodernist neo-Marxists, but it's close enough first pass approximation. So, as I said already, women's studies and all the ethnic studies and racial studies groups, man, those things have to go, and the faster they go, the better. They should never be put... It would have been better had they never been part of the university to begin with, as far as I can tell. Sociology, that's corrupt. Anthropology, that's corrupt. English literature, that's corrupt. Maybe the worst offender are the faculties of education, and I would say what... I read the recent policy documents of the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, and I can tell you, you can go read it, it's right on their website, is that their plan, and they just say it, I'm not making this up, you don't need any inferences, there's nothing implicit about it, is to reorganize the curriculums from kindergarten to grade 8 so that children are taught to be social justice warriors from the moment they step foot in the public education system. That's exactly what they're doing. They're making this. Look, I mean, we have social justice tribunals in Ontario. Okay, that's not subtle, in case you didn't notice. To name them social justice tribunals, that's not subtle. And so you see the same sort of language in the ETFO documents, is that social justice is the right way to go. The appropriate thing to do is to train children to follow precisely that pathway. The best way to do it is to get them as young as possible. It's like, and that's the faculties of education for you. And they're not producing people who are interested in educating children at all. And they're taking the easy route, and what they're doing is training people who can memorize and then spew forth a one-dimensional view of humanity, and then have the gall, the unmitigated gall, to presume that what they should be doing with children is indoctrinating them into that particular line of thinking from as early an age as possible. And so faculties of education, they need to be fixed, and they need to be fixed fast. And then...
just to put in an aside here, because I wanted to give my 5 cents before I forget it. I'm in education, and I have been. The trouble that's happening with education in Canada is exactly as Jordan Peterson laid out right there. But it's much more complicated than that. You see, I've been given the unique perspective to teach elementary students and I can tell you there exists already advanced infrastructure to indoctrinate our kids from elementary school onwards. So what Jordan Peterson is saying there, we have a saying in education: when there is a idea implanted in the head of a student, especially a young student, it is very difficult to get the idea removed once it's implanted. And so let's say you had a math question and you teach the technique of a student, you teach the technique to solve that question to your student, but say you teach them a technique that's incorrect in its execution. So that student will observe you and then absorb the information, and then they will attempt to solve the question like that every time. The problem is that they'll be incorrect, and it's horrible because like when you teach something wrong, then you have to correct that student every time, and it's almost they have to forget the old method and absorb the correct method. So it's extremely difficult to remove an idea in a young child's brain once it's been implanted there. So really, the fundamental problem is that the social justice indoctrination, the political correctness indoctrination, and the climate change indoctrination is happening extremely young. Those 3 points. In the place of religion, the value that we placed on Judeo-Christian teaching, that is being eradicated and destroyed, and in its place are those 3 values that I just outlined. So, and I can tell you from being in practicum and so on, that as an educator, we're sworn to secrecy. This is supposed to be between colleagues and so on and so forth, and that you sort of have a you're bound by as being part of the Teachers Association never to speak of it. And so to do this actually puts me at risk. But at the same time, Jordan Peterson was actually right. The value structures that are going on will create a new generation of radicals. If you care about your children's education, I urge you to scrutinize the assignments and the goals of those assignments of your kids. And I would ask you to, if you care about this sort of thing, that you must correct your children if you notice that the indoctrination is taking place. And you'll know it because their values, what your child values will begin to change and become aligned with that perspective. So anyway, there's a lot that I want to discuss on that topic, but let me just say this. The indoctrination is taking place at the elementary level. And as I told you before, there is a movement away from the fundamentals that built our free society. And whether we'll admit it or not, the free Western society is built on the Judeo-Christian value system. And that kind of teaching has been destroyed in schools. The advancement of secularism, of placing your value on social justice, you know, and issues such as these that I outlined earlier. Jordan Peterson's success has come because he's shined a light on it, so to speak. He was in a unique place within its infrastructure to notice it from the upper echelons where he works. So a professor at the university, one of the most prestigious universities in Canada, the University of Toronto, and associate professor at Harvard. So I can say that, not to mention that Jordan Peterson is a psychologist, but that aside, he was uniquely placed within the educational infrastructure to see what was happening, the indoctrination as it takes place early on. I would say probably 20 years or more before he made his first videos. And he was intimately aware that that was already taking place. And I don't want to say he was helpless, but everything has its time. And at the time, he might not have been able to act in the way that he's acted now, but he's always wanted to. I can guarantee you about that. So, as I said, the whether we'll admit it or not, our society was built on the fundamental principles of the Judeo-Christian teachings, the value of an individual, and that kind of idea is being destroyed, suppressed in favor of group identity, and so on, and splitting and dividing people up into groups and identity groups. So Jordan Peterson touched on it on this clip, but nevertheless, I wanted to direct your attention as parents to your kids in elementary and to scrutinize the material that your children are being taught. Please, as parents, scrutinize, question your kids about what they learned in the school in the day and so on, and let them regurgitate it to you, and try to see it if you're going to study with them and help them to do their homework and so on, and see it for what it is, and I guarantee you'll see it. And Jordan Peterson in this clip is trying to address it mostly at the university level, because that's a lot of the indoctrination takes place in elementary, but also a lot of it takes place in university as well. It's insane. Mostly because the leverage that the university holds on us is debt. We are eager to finish a degree. We are eager to complete our education and get into the workforce and so on. And whatever you have to swallow in school, that's what you get. Yeah, you know, there isn't a choice in the matter. It's not as though you can, like the idea that Jordan Peterson is coming up with a way to figure out if a course is indoctrination or not. That's brilliant, but it didn't exist in my time. You would never know it until it's too late. The professor would deliberately delay indoctrination until it was too late for you to withdraw from the course with your money. And quite frankly, that's very short. That's a short period of time anyway. You would never be able to get enough information, even subtly, to make a value judgment on your professor in that course until it was far too late. I remember a political science professor of mine, she waited until it was about, I don't know, almost halfway into the semester before she began indoctrinating and putting on her own biased view on things and so on. A lot of students disagreed, but nobody will try to challenge that point too much unless you're extremely rebellious. And at that point, you'd probably drop the course anyway. But maybe you wouldn't. That being said, I just want to wrap up the clip that Jordan Peterson spoke of here. There's about 4 minutes left, so I thank you for your attention.
And this is where I'll stop. One of the most shocking things I learned this year is I didn't really know this, but I didn't learn this till I went to Queen's University, because I went to Queen's University. I was invited there by a group of law students, and I was there hypothetically, to debate Bill C-16, and the students went to all the law professors and asked them if they would debate me, and none of them would. And I thought, yeah, well, that figures. First of all, that's what I thought, because, but then I thought, geez, that's pretty absurd, because I'm a psychology professor, and, lawyers, one thing lawyers are pretty good at is arguing, if they're good lawyers. I mean that in a complimentary manner. I mean, that's what you learn to do when you're a lawyer. You learn to speak. You learn to formulate an argument, and you learn to formulate an argument on virtually any set of principles, because you're acting as defense or you're acting as prosecution, and you need to be flexible on your feet and put forward the best possible argument given the facts at hand. And they couldn't find anybody to debate me, so Bruce Pardy, who was a professor there, had to act as devil's advocate, which he did quite nicely. But I thought that was pretty appalling, to say the least, that they were either so ideologically rigid that they wouldn't confront me on their bloody territory. It's like...
Okay, I apologize. I thought that Jordan would go on more about the education system. But that aside, I just want to remind you, as responsible parents, and to take care of the future of this country, because let's face it, the ones that are being indoctrinated now will come forward, and I can only say that the viewpoint will become more and more and more radicalized. And it does exist at the lower levels when the students are young, because what the educators figured out right away is the subtleties of a psychological indoctrination, and they've perfected their methods. It's all subtle. On its face, it will appear to have no danger whatsoever, but it's the culmination of all those points together over the years of education going forward into the future, and it will be hammered, and it will be pressed and persisted into the brains of your kids until that comprises part of their personality, of their psyche, everything. It's so dangerous and so irresponsible, and to propagate that kind of thinking, you as parents are in the best position possible to stop it from happening or to correct it early so that your kids don't end up in that position. Because what you'll have is, at its end, when they've reached their teenage years and they start to mature, is they'll spit it back to you, and they'll be part of all these new radicalist movements that are existing in this country. And you can say, well, I support those things, so on and so forth. And that is your right. You are absolutely in right if you wish to support that kind of thing. But I urge you to see the deeper motivation behind it. It is actually designed to divide us as Canadians and to undermine the fabric of our society that we've built, that our ancestors built, so to speak. And it's designed that the whole guilt thing with the that they're trying to make the claims in universe, all these radical ideas that are literally insane and also try to destroy the fabric of our society. That's where they introduce it, and it's subtle, but it's everlasting through all the way to the university level. And you must take a stance against it, and you must try to correct the perspective of your kids. I was uniquely placed that my parents, they taught me to question the narratives, and especially to question its source and to figure out the motivation of that source. That's the only thing that stopped me from falling into the trap, and I still fell into the trap early in university. It's very difficult when you're going against the official narrative. You're alienated by your fellow students and by your professor, so you have no choice but to embrace the indoctrination. Really, it's that's the case. The only way I got out of it is because there's people like Jordan Peterson out there that really, if you talk to them, they'll set you straight in a very short period of time, because you in your heart know the truth, but sometimes it's very hard to express the truth, and let's leave it at that. But it's difficult to express the truth, and more difficult for you to present evidence, let's say, in defense of the truth. So in that way, I'll just leave you with please beware of what your children are educated, especially in English literature and social studies in elementary, and take note of, ask questions when you pick a school for your child to go to, and figure out what is the underlying goal of that school, what its value structure is, and so on, and question the teacher, and try to figure out as much as possible about what they're trying to teach your kids. Every day after you get your kid home from school, question them about what they learned on the day. Of course you would. But try to, even from their assignments, try to figure out as much as you can what's happening. And if possible, correct your child's perspective in alignment with the value that our society is built on. So I thank you for your time. This for me is a very difficult issue to fully encompass in one video, so I'll probably make more. But I thank you for your time and attention, and goodbye.